Hi, my name is Tiffany Falzone, and today I'm going to be going over some of the major perspectives in psychology. Um, I used my family to help me out with this video presentation. I felt like in order to express the reasons why I like the theories that I like, I should use the people that inspire me to study psychology and um, help me get a better grasp on a lot of the concepts. I find in studying that because I have 5 children, I can relate a lot of what I learned to at least one of them because they're all so different, and if not, somebody else I know. So, a better way to creatively express my understanding of the field of psychology other than using the people that help me to understand it better. I'd like to start with a rundown of the different perspectives, just a quick overview. The first one would be the biological perspective, which um, goes over more of inheritance, different systems of the body and how they may affect behavior, like endocrine, immune system, the nervous system, any of that. Theorists that are involved with that include Darwin, Harlow, the Phineas Gage, which most people have heard of that story where the guy had the railroad spike go through his head, and it brought a great deal of attention to neuroscience as far as how different parts of the brain affect different parts of you, such as personality. Phineas Gage survived a railroad spike going through his head, but his personality was changed forever. So that story will probably always stick with me. That is crazy. Next, there's a psychodynamic perspective, which Freud is really big in with ego, superego, and ID, and talk about those a little bit more later. That perspective focuses more on influences from early childhood or subconsciousness or past experiences and how they affect your current behavior. Jung, Adler, and Erikson were other theorists that worked on the psychodynamic approach, mainly about past experiences and how they affect how you're dealing with current events, like defense mechanisms. Maybe past experiences in school cause a child not to want to go to school, so they display issues of avoidance, like faking sick and whatnot like that. Like, say, we're talking past experiences in elementary school, then you have an adolescent with these issues. Behavioral psychology. Behaviorism is more about how behavior occurs or how it can be changed by environmental factors. This one's pretty straightforward. If I took one of my kids and had them in a very quiet, relaxed setting, or even a studious environment, they act completely different at school than they do at home. They don't jump on desks or run around and be crazy and steal candy out of cabinets at school. They do at home. I feel that it could also affect how a child behaves in general. Say their environment at home is not supportive of healthy development. That would affect their behavior in general, whether at home or at school, and how they deal with conflict and issues that they're having. The humanistic approach, which focuses on the motivation of people to grow psychologically. I like this one, and later you'll see how much I like it. a lot about reaching one's goals and what's needed to get there and motivation. I lost my spot in my notes. Sorry. Maslow. That was the name I was looking for. Maslow's hierarchy for human motivation. Different levels of what motivates us. That I'll discuss later. Next is the cognitive perspective, and it focuses on the role of mental processes in development, how people learn to speak, solve problems. My absolute favorite is Piaget's model for child development, which gives steps in sequence of how children develop to reach the type of logic and reasoning that we have as adults. We'll talk about that one more later too. Cross-cultural psychology, which focuses on how culture may influence behaviors. Excuse me, can you lower your conversation a little bit? Thank you. Sorry. Cross-cultural, so how different cultural factors may influence behavior. And when they talk about cross-cultural, it's not just ethnicity. It would also be like sexual orientation or socioeconomical status, or any kind of factors that would make you different could cause differences in behaviors. For example, in some cultures it may be normal to stop and pray in the middle of the day publicly, whereas in American culture, if we saw somebody knelt down praying on the sidewalk or talking to the sky on the sidewalk, we might call somebody and say there's a crazy person on the sidewalk. Maybe. We're kind of a diverse country, but you get the idea. Evolutionary perspective applies the theories of evolution, natural selection, Charles Darwin, to explain psychological processes. Behavioral. I missed theorists. So for behavioral psychology, you have Watson and Skinner, who talked about operant and classical conditioning, which I will also talk about later, especially since I left it out on this part. So, that's all my notes for the overview. Humanistic approach, hierarchical theory of human motivation. Take one. Take one. Mariah.
Physiological.
Very good. Physiological. So, physiological needs that come first in the hierarchy would be breathing, food, water, sex, Elsa, sleep, and excretion. Very good, Mariah. Thank you. Josiah. Yes, go back. Josiah. Hold up your sign. What's your word? Hold it up to the computer. Safety. Thank you, Josiah. Safety would include the security of body, employment, resources, mortality, the family, health, and property.
We're going biggest to littlest.
Not quite.
Mary.
Mary.
What's your word?
Love and belonging.
Love and belonging. Thank you. So that includes friendship, family, and intimacy.
Yes.
Jameson.
Yours.
Esteem. Very good. Esteem. So self-esteem, confidence, achievement, and respect for and by others. And last but not least, we have Drew filling in for Aiden.
Self-actualization.
Thank you, Drew. So morality, creativity, spontaneity, problem solving, lack of prejudice, and acceptance of facts would all be included in the tier of self-actualization. So the humanistic approach is actually one of my favorites, and it reminds me of a poem that my children say at school. It's actually their school pledge. So if Mariah, Jameson, and Mary would come forward, I'll hold that. Thank you. Thank you. All right, Mariah, Mary, and Jameson, I would like to hear the school pledge, starting with I am somebody.
I am somebody. I am capable. I am lovable. I am teachable. Therefore, I can learn. I can do anything when I try. I will respect myself and others. I'll be the best that I can be each day. I'll not waste time because it's too valuable and I am too important and bright. I am somebody.
That was really fast. I don't know if we understood that.
Oh, you can do the goblin.
Oh, we're not going to do that one, right?
Do it!
Thank you.
Please. Pledge allegiance?
No, yeah, she's talking about the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay,
I'll
so
do the pledge allegiance.
that is my favorite part of the humanistic approach, and by far probably one of my favorite perspectives in general. So one of my favorite perspectives is the cognitive perspective, and Piaget came up with a great theory involving child development and how they process information and how it affects their behavior. So Drew's holding a picture of our sleeping child, and he's 9. And due to disabilities, he's developmentally at the age of a 6 to 9 month old, developmentally wise. So he fits into the sensory motor portion of Piaget's theory, which is typically 1 to 2 years. Things that I would have shown you if he wasn't asleep, he's very into textures and exploring things through the different textures, and he loves playing peekaboo, which has to do with the object permanence portion of the sensory motor age group. So if Mary, Mariah, and Josiah would step forward, please. The next age group that Piaget had was the pre-operational age group, which is 2 to 6 years. Josiah will be 4 here soon. Mary just turned 5, and Mariah will be 6 in July. So they all fit into this age group. This age group uses words and images to understand the world and represent objects to an extent, but they don't reason logically. They're also really good at playing pretend. Who likes to play pretend?
Me!
What do you want to pretend to be?
I like to be a police.
Go ahead, let me see you be a police.
I don't know how.
Mary?
I want to be a princess.
Okay, let me see you be a princess. Very good. Mariah?
I want to be I be
Okay. Very good.
What about me? What?
Jameson would be in the next age group.
Mommy, I want to be a ballerina now.
That's what you said. Okay, be a police.
Can't show me how to be it?
Like that, Joe.
Or you could round up somebody like this.
Very good. Okay, Jameson would be in the concrete operational phase, which means that he's capable of thinking logically about concrete objects. Jameson, what is 7 plus 3?
I know to do that with
10. Very good. And can understand conservation. most of the time he's 8, so you know.
How much milk do we pour in a glass, Jameson?
Can I tell you what I want to do?
Jameson, how much milk do we pour in a glass? Only what we're going to drink.
Mom, can you tell me after I'm done? Thank you. Okay, finally we come to the formal operational stage, which is ages 12 and up, which is where adolescents begin to reason in a more abstract manner. So using hypothetical situations, they can reason on how to solve. Basically, that's it for that one. I really like this one because I have 5,000 children, and it helps me understand them on a day-to-day basis. So, one of my favorite perspectives in psychology is the behavioral perspective because it talks about classical conditioning and Ivan Pavlov's dogs. It's a common reference that pretty much everyone's heard of, where Pavlov had actually conditioned his dogs to salivate to the sound of a bell or a tone or whatever, instead of only salivating at the presentation of food, by training them that when they heard the bell, they got food. So eventually he could ring the bell without the presence of food and they would still salivate, which is pretty impressive, and you could see how that would happen. Although classical conditioning focuses more on involuntary or automatic behaviors, which would be harder to control than, say, in operant conditioning. You have you're applying reinforcement or punishment after a behavior to increase or decrease the likeliness that it would happen, the likelihood that it would happen. So, say we want Jameson to study harder in school because he has a learning disability. So, we would reinforce the behavior of him studying extra with, say, extra TV time or Nintendo DS time or outside playtime. One of those things to reinforce that, hey, when you study, that's a good thing, and you'll get good things in return. Punishment by almost 4-year-old, my 3-year-old, who still thinks that tantrums are okay. Has to take a time out when he has a tantrum, and when he's done having a tantrum, he can get out of timeout. So by sending him to timeout to calm down, he's learning, okay, well, the longer I sit here and scream, the longer I have to stay in timeout, which would be punishment. It also talks about how there's positive and negative reinforcement, so you can negatively reinforce behavior to affect how the likelihood of it also, which gets complicated. Negative reinforcement and punishment sound like the same thing, but they're really not. Anyways, focusing on strengthening or weakening voluntary behaviors. So behaviors that people or animals can control. Those would fall under that type of conditioning. Skinner was, the theorist that came up with that method. Okay, so theories that I'm less crazy about, I wouldn't say that there's any theory or perspectives that I dislike. There are some that interest me less. Like the psychodynamic theory, I get it. It's really big. Everybody loves it. Not as interesting to me as cognitive or humanistic. Not sure why, it's just not. It goes over, Freud had the theory about the ID, ego, and superego. It talks about how behavior is motivated by instinctual drives. The ego involves like pre-conscious and conscious thought, and involves like self and reality principle, whereas the ID and superego are unconscious and run more on like the pleasure principle and unconscious urges and desires and moral guardian and whatnot. I think my biggest issue with this theory is just that when you look at it from that perspective, it kind of makes you feel like your behavior is less within your own control than I would personally like. Not saying that the perspective is wrong, it is fascinating to plenty of people. I just, personally, it's not one of my favorites. The biological theory is good. I feel like that it's more of from a medical standpoint and is less interesting to me because it's a lot more of the medical stuff. I know nothing about how the nervous system works or anything like that. Endocrine, I've got down with having a special needs child that sees an endocrinologist. I get that. How it affects behavior, not as much. But I do understand how like inheritance plays a big role with psychological disorders, which would affect behavior and whatnot. Drug interactions, big thing. Also more of like a doctor standpoint, and I'm not really at that level in my life yet. So, like I said, not a theory that I dislike, just one that I'm less in love with than the ones I've previously described. Cross-cultural. Not exactly anything wrong with it, just that one would hope that the world would be more accepting of diversity. It's a strength in society. Differences are what make us more interesting. So, as far as cross-cultural psychology goes, it's interesting. It's not an aspect of psychology that I would like to get sucked into. Obviously, being understanding of other cultures so that you can better diagnose and treat patients in their own comfort zone is beneficial. But as far as research and stuff, it's not really one of my personal interests. I try and think of people as people and not really where they came from, their socioeconomic status, their sexual orientation. Like, I would like to be knowledgeable of those things and how they would affect treatment. I wouldn't necessarily want to research them. Okay, the evolutionary perspective. I don't know if it's that I'm not understanding it properly or just that the same as the others is not really, I'm kind of indifferent to it. But I don't see a whole lot of connection in evolutionary processes in psychology. Not enough to where I would be like, oh man, I want to study that. So that's why I didn't pick that as one of my favorites. So that's it for ones that I dislike or I'm just indifferent to, I guess. I think a lot of the perspectives that we've talked about have the potential to take great strides in the future of psychology. I think any of them has the potential to. Things that are exciting to me, from the biological perspective, you have there's a great deal of research going into gender role development and how it could be affected by genetics. I don't really know that much about that right now, but sexual orientation and gender roles are becoming more and more of an interest. So research into that, I'm sure, would be really big. One of my son's nurses was talking about the immune system and how it can be affected by stress factors and stuff like that the other day, and I found that pretty interesting. I did some reading on that. That's one of the things that the biological perspective is currently working on more information about that. I'm sure there's lots of other ones. Like I said, it's not one of my most, like, the topics that I'm most interested in, but I definitely see how they could come across things with that. The psychodynamic perspective, I've done some research into what's going on with that currently. It looks like most of the research involves coming up with different treatment approaches for the psychodynamic perspective of psychology. I'm sure that that could come a long way if you're interested in that perspective. Behavioral psychology is less popular, I feel personally, nowadays than it might have been in the past. It's still applied to the mental health profession, obviously. I've seen it. I mean, my kids are in therapy, like, their therapist talks to me about stuff. Like, I can still see how it's useful in therapy today, but I think advancements kind of slowed down a lot in that field. There's only so far you can go. Sorry, the kids are jumping upstairs. Cognitive psychology has for a while been comparing the mind to a computer. As technology develops and we learn more about human development, maybe I'll come up with a better analogy. I don't know. I think technology is more complex than we're advancing with our research in psychology. Technology grows so much faster, so I don't really think that that's an accurate generalization anymore. But also, I guess I would hope that technology would eventually lead to further understanding of psychological, not just like physically, but eventually maybe they'll invent a machine that can tell us more about cognitive development and whatnot without, say, the biological advancements of like brain scans and MRIs and PET scans and whatnot. Which biologically, that's given us so much more information. Technology is gonna, like I said, continue to advance and won't really be able to compare the mind to a computer anymore, but with those technological advancements, we'll probably learn even more about the brain, which may explain more about personality and behavior. And if not, maybe they'll develop a technology that simply focuses on personality and behavior. Who knows? Diversity in our society and every society is going to continue to grow. So cross-culturally, I mean, I think that that perspective is on the newer end, especially when it comes to sexual orientation and gender identification and socioeconomical status, like factors other than ethnicity. I think the study into that and what makes people behave differently due to that is so new that that will definitely have some advancements in the future. Not maybe like, mind-blowing technology and treatment advancements, but definitely I think we'll know more in the future about what makes people different and how to deal with certain issues that are specific to specific cultures. And I think that's all I have to say. I've run out of notes, so I'm guessing that is all I have to say. Thank you for your time. Hope you enjoyed the presentation and the crazy children. And have a great day.